ability any court's going to ever hear this and say that it was wrong that secretaries of state changed the law in the middle of this pandemic without the approval of the legislature? Or do you think there's no hope because it's mixed up in electoral politics? Judge Starr.
I think there is a possibility because this issue may return in light of this unprecedented use of mail-in ballots, and the concern that is a bipartisan concern, again, the Carter-Baker Commission, that we need to look at these issues. And so I think there is a doctrine, Senator Paul, to essentially say this issue may recur again, so it should not be washed out as being moot, because there's a very important principle here, as I made in my opening statement and in my written statement. The Constitution is very clear that it is the prerogative of state legislatures to determine what these rules and laws are. And that was, I must say, flagrantly violated in Pennsylvania and perhaps elsewhere as well.
Yeah, see, I think the legal question there is a very easy one to decide. I think even as a physician, I can figure out that the Secretary of State cannot create law. I do think, though, that many of us who wanted this to be heard by the Supreme Court and are disappointed actually also might be disappointed by the precedent of Bush versus Gore, in the sense that I think Bush versus Gore's precedent is shutting down elections that have been certified. They weren't going to continue to count the hanging chads. The Secretary of State had certified it. So I actually think that the Bush versus Gore precedent actually argues against the Supreme Court overturning certified elections. Do you have an opinion on that?
I don't have an opinion on that specifically. I think that Bush v. Gore stands for this basic proposition. You cannot have changes in election laws after the fact. You must, in fact, be faithful to what the state legislature has done. That's also what Justice
Again, listening in live to the Senate holding a hearing on 2020 voting irregularities. Judge Ken Starr speaking now, answering some questions from Senator Rand Paul. They just initially were questioned about those 60 court cases from the Trump legal team that were sort of rejected by these courts. And Senator Paul had asked if it was the procedural reasons and not the merit or the substance that led to these cases being thrown out. Judge Starr agreed with that statement. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you really look at it from this perspective, I mean, we're really getting some concrete step-by-step. What is the actual reasons for why this has actually been thrown out? But we're going to continue to actually go through these hearings and continue to follow it. But right now, we're going to hear from Bob Sellers doing our market report.
The Wall Street Update is presented by Interactive Brokers, the professional's gateway to the world's markets. Start investing today.
Hey folks, there is a possibility that there will be a new COVID relief bill today. And no, this isn't Groundhog Day, and Bill Murray will not have the weather forecast, although it is supposed to snow. Wall Street is expecting something out of Washington at least this week, which is balancing out some of the negative effects of the growing number of shutdowns we're seeing throughout the country. The Dow right now is down 31 points, and NASDAQ up about 27. Retail sales fell for a second straight month in November. The 1.1% drop reflects a slowing economy and a decrease in household income. Now, that is hurting sales during the early days of the holiday shopping season. But if there is a new relief deal from Congress, that might change. Mortgage rates continue to fall to record lows, which is leading to a rise in refinancing applications. Last week, they were up 105% over a year ago. And finally, Bitcoin has hit a record price of $20,600, up 180% this year. The main driver of the rising prices on the digital currency is that some big name investors have taken positions in the cryptocurrency, and that's giving it an air of acceptance on Wall Street. I've never bought Bitcoin, and if I knew how high or low it was going to go, I'd have an island in the Caribbean. But if you're inclined to buy it yourself, keep in mind that it hit almost 20,000 back in 2017 and then plummeted to about 3,000. So that could happen again. And if someone tells you how great Bitcoin is, just ask them this question. How is more Bitcoin created? Get some popcorn, sit back, and wait to be amazed. That's the Wall Street Update. I'm Bob Sellers.
Interactive Brokers charges 1.59% for a $100,000 margin loan. Do you know how much your broker charges? Upwards from 6.82% at Fidelity or Schwab to as high as 7.45 to 7.75% at E-Trade or Ameritrade. Move your account to Interactive Brokers and save at least $5,200 or much more if you're trading big bucks.
Hi, Walter. Join us for a walk?
Do you suffer from leg aches and pains, cramps, or swollen feet and ankles? Let Revitive Medic Circulation Booster help you get back on your feet and doing what you love. Call or go online to see why over 2 million people trust Revitive Medic. Developed by physical therapists and vascular surgeons, Revitive works by sending gentle waves of electricity to the nerves in your feet that stimulate your calf muscles to pump fresh, oxygen-rich blood throughout your legs and feet. Revitive is FDA cleared for people with arthritis or medical conditions causing poor leg circulation.
I've tried everything to get rid of my pain, and nothing has worked like Revitive.
It's virtually given us back our lives, and I'm so grateful for that.
Revitive is the one and only circulation booster clinically proven to increase oxygen-rich blood flow.
Wow, you can really feel it.
Patented waveforms stimulate the nerve endings in your feet to get your leg muscles contracting. This boosts your circulation to relieve painful legs and feet and reduce cramps or swelling. Revitive is drug-free. Think of the money you'll save in prescriptions. Get back on your feet again today. Go online now to learn more about how Revitive can help relieve your leg pain. Call or go online and order Revitive Medic and receive free shipping. We'll also send you our targeted pain relief body pads. Imagine taking long walks again or having the second dance.
My granddaughter asked me to dance with her. I danced 2 long dances with her, and I would never have been able to do that without Revitive.
Get your life back from leg aches and pains and swelling drug-free with Revitive Medic. So call 1-800-960-8051 or go to revitivemedic.com now for your Revitive Medic. So call 1-800-960-8051 or go to revitivemedic.com now.
Why is Hempvana the #1 hemp pain relief brand in America?
Because it has thousands of 5-star reviews and millions of happy customers.
Because it works on my back pain.
So trusted, I recommend it to my patients.
Buy Hempvana today in stores everywhere.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the NEWSMAX app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Breaking news now. We are listening into a Senate hearing on 2020 voting irregularities. Senator Thomas Carper from Delaware, Democrat, is speaking now, asking questions to Chris Krebs, the former director of cybersecurity and infrastructure security. Let's listen in.
My mask here from my alma mater, an undergraduate alma mater at Ohio State, where I was a Navy ROTC midshipman. But if the football coach at Ohio State were to go 2-59 over a period of 4 years, he would be fired. He would be fired. And in effect, that's what the voters of this country have done with our president, like it or not. Those 61 cases, at least 59 of them, were not close calls. In suit after suit across red and blue states, in opinions written by liberal and ultra-conservative judges, the Trump campaign's largely contrived allegations have been rejected. 4 years after Donald Trump lost the popular vote by 3 million votes, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won it by a whopping 7 million votes. And they received 306 votes in the Electoral College just earlier this week, a margin described 4 years ago by candidate Trump as a landslide. But what if the outcome is not as definitive 4 years from now or 8 years from now? What if? And with different judges on the bench, different candidates, and a lot less integrity and courage from state and local officials, a defeated party might somehow be able to steal an election. It's been alleged here falsely. Think about that. It somehow might be able to steal an election. Friends, that ought to scare the hell out of all of us. Meanwhile, many of the president's supporters across the country continue to spread misinformation and false allegations about the presidential election. The truth of the matter is, in a lot of states, many of the voters who voted for Joe Biden for president turned around on their ballots and they voted on down ballot races. To our chagrin as Democrats, they voted Republicans. They voted for Republican in congressional races, in state legislative races, and more. You know what we call that in Delaware? We call it ticket splitting. It's as old as our democracy. It's not a conspiracy. It's plain and simple ticket splitting. We've done it before, and we're going to do it again. Let me go on to say that what we say in this committee and in this body matters. And if we continue to push what the courts have over time overwhelmingly called baseless claims of fraud, we not only risk permanent damage to our democracy, we also become complicit in threats and attacks against election officials and ordinary citizens. In Georgia, nonpartisan election technicians have faced death threats simply for doing their jobs. The Georgia Secretary of State and his family have received death threats. Mr. Krebs, our witness here today, a Trump appointee, has been bombarded with threats ever since an attorney for President Trump's campaign said on national TV, what did he say? He said, Krebs should be taken out at dawn and shot. And just this week, quote, credible threats of violence closed the Michigan State Capitol, and electors in Pennsylvania needed law enforcement escorts when they went to cast their votes. This is not the America that our founding fathers dreamed of. This is shameful. Enough already. We have work to do to get America back on track, starting right here in this Congress, in this House. All of us, Democrats and Republicans here in this body, need to do our jobs. And that's just the beginning. There are over 250 million Americans who need to be vaccinated. There are millions of businesses that need a helping hand. Tens of millions of students who need to be back in school getting an education. Hundreds of thousands of hospital and nursing workers who just need a break. But it's going to be hard to move forward as a country with dispatch or as a Congress until we accept the clear results of this election and turn the page. In 1787, colleagues, delegates from 13 colonies convened in Philadelphia to debate the future of our country. You know, they disagreed on a lot of things, but they all agreed on this. They didn't want a king. In responding to arguments for the Trump legal team in Wisconsin, a member of the state Supreme Court there echoed these sentiments recently when she said to them, quote, "You want us to overturn this election so that your king can stay in power? That's un-American," close quote. And you know what? She was right. It is un-American. So, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, our chairman's not sitting here, he's out voting, but when Chairman Johnson, when he became the leader of this committee in 2015, he pledged to run this committee, and I quote, "with a spirit of bipartisan teamwork, respect, integrity, and professionalism." You know, that's been the hallmark of this committee for years, for decades. And those words were reassuring to me. I know they were to our colleagues on this committee, to the staffs that we lead. And a few years later, when the chairman and I worked together to introduce and enact the Bipartisan Presidential Transition Improvement Act, he said, and I quote, "The peaceful transition of power from one administration to the next is the hallmark of our democracy," close quote. Those are words we hope and expect to hear from our leaders. Words that appeal to our better angels. Words that unite us, not divide us. And sadly, I fear that today's hearing may not be truly reflective of those words. I hope I'm wrong. But if I'm not, today's hearing could prove deeply disappointing to me and to the 330 million people that we serve across this nation. Let's not disappoint them. And as we continue with this hearing today, I would just say to our chairman, you ask our witness to stand and take an oath to tell the truth. It's only fair for all of us to hold ourselves to the same standard. If our nation's leaders don't embrace the truth in our daily discourse, then we no longer have a democracy that will endure. Calling an election on fire does not make it so. and spreading misinformation in this committee or any committee doesn't just stay inside these four walls. I'll conclude with this. I began my statement today with the words of Abraham Lincoln. I want to conclude it with the words attributed to Thomas Jefferson. Here's what he said. If the people know the truth, they won't make a mistake. If the people know the truth, they won't make a mistake. So let's tell them the truth. Let's tell them the truth today, tomorrow, and for generations to come. The truth will keep us free. The truth will keep us free. It always has, and it always will. Thank you.
Thank you. The chairman ran down to vote quickly, and we are in the middle of a vote series, and so we're going to maintain the hearing and continue to be able to move through this hearing process, though there's two votes, and so you'll see us switching back and forth while he is running to vote. I'm going to sit in for a moment for the chairman, and I'm going to recognize myself for the next bat of questions. I happen to be next in line, so I'm not actually pulling time here, but I want to be able to recognize myself and be able to do that. When he returns, we'll switch out, and I'll run to vote, and then we'll run back and forth. December 2016, there was a poll that was done on if the American people believe that the Russians interfered and changed our election. At that time, 32% of the people believed that the Russians had influenced the outcome of the election in December of 2016. Based on that belief and what was going on, there was launched a whole series of hearings. Certainly the Russians were trying to interfere in our elections, but we spent millions and millions of dollars investigating it, going through it, ramping up entities like CISA and others to be able to go engage, to be able to make sure we protect our next election. Senator Klobuchar and I worked for years on election security legislation and worked to be able to get that implemented. We did 6 different public hearings on Russian interference just on that one topic to make sure that we were paying attention to it, when it all started with 32% of Americans in December of 2016 believing the Russians had interfered in our election. A few days ago, another poll asked the question, do you believe there was election and voter fraud in the presidential election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump? This December, 46% of the voters in America have said yes, 45% saying no. Interestingly enough, Trump voters say there was fraud, 80%. Biden voters also said 16% that they believe that there was voter fraud. The reason I bring that up is we watched what happened in 2016 and what the American people thought and saw, and so we engaged with hearings, we looked at the issues and determined, do things need to change? Much of the work that's gone on the last several years to be able to get paper ballots into states happened because this Congress engaged on an issue where we saw an obvious problem. And so we distributed federal dollars, assistance, and a constant drumbeat to say these states have got to fix the areas where they don't have paper ballots and we have the potential for problems. That was the question. Is there a potential for a problem? The answer was yes, there's a potential, and we ought to fix that. Now, amazingly, after this election, all kinds of issues have come up and said there are potentials for problem, and everyone seems to be saying, move on. The only reason I can think that that would be different was because the election outcome seemed to be different. And one side is now saying, let's just move on and ignore this. In my state on election night, like 27 other states in the country, by that evening, we were counting votes and all absentee ballots had been received. There was much less opportunity for accusations of fraud because all of our ballots were in. Amazingly enough, a week after the election was completed this November, Oklahomans were listening to other states that were saying things like, we don't know how many more ballots there are left to count. We had been done for a week. We and 27 other states had been completed for a week. That gives opportunities for fraud and questions and problems. That's a reasonable question to ask. It's reasonable to be able to ask if people can drift around and gather ballots from other people and do ballot harvesting, and in some states that's legal, does that provide an opportunity for fraud? I think the obvious answer is yes. The obvious answer is if you mail a ballot to everyone in the state, even if they didn't ask for it, does it provide an opportunity for fraud, especially when the state did not first purge or verify those addresses, and they sent thousands of ballots to people that no longer live there? I've talked to Nevada residents that receive multiple ballots at their home for people that no longer live there. That's a problem. And we should at least admit that's a problem. And for some reason, the other side was very focused on, we've got to fix the potential for problem from 2016. But in 2020, when there's potential for problem and things that have been shown, everyone seems to say, move along. Let's not discuss this. There's a system called the ERIC system that's in place that 30 states cooperate with. It helps them verify if people have moved and they're registered in 2 different states, or if they've moved into your state and they're registered somewhere else. It helps them determine if they're voting in 2 different states. Only 30 states use that. Other states are not. And even of the 30 states that use it, not all of them are actually using it. They literally are on the system, but they're not actually purging their rolls when they know there are people that have moved out of their states and have been informed of that. Just this last year in the ERIC system, they identified 91,000 people that are registered voters that are dead. 91,000 that one system had recognized. There are problems in the system. And in this conversation that I've had with so many people, and I've said, is it a problem that people are voting in 2 states? Is it a problem that people are voting after they're dead? And this is what I hear over and over again. This has been going on for years. So why don't we fix it? Should be the next statement. Instead, the statement seems to be, well, let's just move along. Mr. Banal, 42,000 people in Nevada voted more than once, according to your work in this. 42,000 people. 1,500 people voted in Nevada that were dead. 19,000 people voted though they did not live in Nevada and they weren't a college student. 8,000 people voted from a non-existent address. 15,000 people voted, though they were registered to a commercial address or a vacant address. And 4,000 people voted in Nevada that are non-citizens. My question to you is, in my state, when someone votes twice, and we do have that occasionally, and about 50 times a year that actually occurs in our state, we prosecute individuals that vote twice. Of this 130,000 instances that you have identified from the 2020 election in Nevada, do you know of any prosecutions currently going on in Nevada for any voter fraud?
Not yet, Senator, and that's extremely important. These laws have to be enforced. We, of course, I represent the Trump campaign and the campaign's electors. I don't represent the government. We can't bring prosecutions. But if we are going to enforce voter integrity laws, they must be enforced, and we are confident that although it often takes a long time to put together a fraud case, although it takes prosecutors months, sometimes even years, to go through subpoenas and warrants and using the FBI to go investigate these things, once a good hard look at these cases is examined, an honest look, if we do that, there should be charges brought, because the ranking member brought up in his remarks that when you lose the principle of one person, one vote, the end result is authoritarianism. That's exactly what we're saying here today.
Right, and that's a major issue. Mr. Chairman, could I ask for one additional moment? Judge Starr, you've raised twice this issue about Pennsylvania and that the laws of Pennsylvania were changed. In Oklahoma, we did State Bill 210 and State Bill 1779 because we saw with the pandemic there were going to be problems. So our legislature came into session, made a change to be able to adjust for how we were going to do early ballots and early voting. So because we knew that was the law that needed to be followed. Was that done in Pennsylvania, and does it matter who sets the law and the rules for elections?
No, it was not done, unfortunately, in Pennsylvania. The governor sought to change the law. The General Assembly of Pennsylvania had met, reviewed, and made various and sundry changes and reforms. And then the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, building what the governor had done, made additional changes. And those, in my judgment, were complete violations of the United States Constitution and flagged as such preliminarily by Justice Samuel Alito. So the Oklahoma legislature did it the right way.
Judge Starr, thank you very much. Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you very much. Just want to test that folks can hear me.
They can.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and for our ranking member. I want to also thank all our witnesses for being here today. And I'd like to specifically acknowledge former CISA Director Chris Krebs. Director Krebs, I want to thank you for your work in standing up the agency as CISA's first director and in securing our elections. I remain deeply troubled by your abrupt and unjustified dismissal, which has made our country less safe. Now, more than ever, the challenges of this pandemic and our nation's increased reliance on online services requires the experience and steady leadership that you have displayed. Even so, I want to express my deep thanks to you and to the men and women at CISA for the work that you have done and will continue to do to help make our country and our communities safer. Now, I have 3 questions for you, Director Krebs. Let's start with this one. As the CISA director, you attempted to tackle disinformation campaigns via the rumor control effort by CISA. That's the name you all gave it. Rumor control is a resource featured on CISA's website to debunk common misinformation and disinformation narratives. So first, in your time as CISA director, were you ever asked by any administration official to refrain from debunking disinformation or misinformation?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. I was never directly approached on any rumor control changes or alterations. I understand my staff was. I told them that if anyone
And
had
you've been listening to the Senate holding hearings on the 2020 voting irregularities. We've had a lot of great information that's been disseminated, really trying to dig into the actual data that supports some of these findings on a state-by-state basis, the irregularities, things that people have been talking about for a very long time, the mass mailing out of mail-in voting without any regard for the impact that would have as far as people not actually living in the places where the ballots were sent. For more on this, we're going to talk to our panel briefly. We've got Amanda Mackey, Republican strategist and an attorney, also Bobby Eberle, Republican strategist and host of the 13-Minute News Hour. So I'll start with you, Amanda.